Hello and welcome to the command phase. My name is Mark and thank you so much for joining me. With the release of the Sand and Bone gaming pack, we now have the rule sets for the 4 brand new Spearheads for Age of Sigmar that came alongside it. Plus the Gloomspite Gitz and Soulblight Gravelords recently getting their new battletomes, they have another 2 Spearheads I've yet to cover on the channel. Albeit those Spearhead boxes haven't been released yet at the time of recording, but hopefully they'll be out shortly. In terms of breaking down each, in the same way as the previous video on this topic with all the other Spearheads, which is linked in the description below, we'll be looking to see what is in every Spearhead box, the amount of points you can build from it from the very recent June points update, the value you get from each box compared to buying each unit separately from Games Workshop, if it's a good starting point for an army, and even if it's worth getting multiples. Plus, if you're looking to find out how they fare in the Spearhead format, I've got you covered. Each is discussed and ranked in a tier list as of the latest June 2025 update, so you can jump into your next purchase with a little more information. There are timestamps in the description below if you want to jump to a specific faction that you're most interested in. So without any further ado, let's get stuck in. First up we have the Cities of Sigmar Fusil-platoon Spearhead, and inside we get 1 Fusil Major on Ogor Warhulk, 1 Alchemite Warforger, 10 Free Guild Fusiliers and 1 unit of Wildercorp Hunters. This brings you to a total of 460 points you can build from this box, which is pretty much the same as the existing Spearhead for the Cities of Sigmar, while in terms of value you're looking at 34%, which is typical for these boxes. What I do like here is the composition of this box is completely different to the other Spearhead, with a lot more ranged firepower here with the Fusiliers and Fusil Major to help deal with the enemy, alongside the faster moving Wildercorp Hunters to help score objectives and battle tactics. A fantastic set of models from the human side of the army which I'm a big fan of. In my eyes, it would make perfect sense to grab 1 of each Spearhead to help build a force if you wanted to start or expand into the full version of Age of Sigmar. In terms of the Spearhead itself, while it's a different playstyle to the other Cities of Sigmar Spearhead and thematically it's a really cool box, sadly it's a little bit underwhelming. The fortified position battle trait makes the army a little more resilient on some pretty weak bodies, although you're really only going to worry about that on your opponent's turn, as the majority of the time you're going to want to move to score points on yours. The Alchemite Warforger is an odd choice of character here. Your only real option is to keep him with the Wildercorp Hunters, so his blazing weapons ability is somewhat useful, especially as the dog's attacks don't class as companion, so would benefit from the ability too. The 5-man unit of Fusiliers with 1 attack each really won't benefit from it if they get stuck in combat. The Wildercorp Hunters really are your main movement and combat threat for this force, but it's pretty much a necessity to take the respected leader regiment ability to give them reinforcements as they die to a stiff breeze. This ability feels far more beneficial to your scoring than the once per game having +1 to wound when shooting with either one of the 5-man units of Fusiliers or the 7 Hunters armed with a crossbow. Honestly, your Fusil Major on Warhulk is one of the better warlords in Spearhead, with a decent ranged attack, pretty solid melee if he gets tied up, and the Mark Target's ability to help buff your army's shooting to focus fire at 1 unit. I'd also highly recommend the Shield Bash enhancement on him, not only to provide some extra mortal wounds from making your opponent retreat, but also freeing up any other unit that may well be stuck in combat too. While the Fusiliers are some of my favourite models from the entire city's range, I do find it odd that there are 2 5-man units in this Spearhead, especially with the General's ability, as more often than not you're going to be shooting at the same target for more efficiency. That being said, their ranged output is decent, albeit will end up dying fairly quickly in combat with very little way of hitting back. So if you can, try to make sure that you don't lose more than 1 of your reinforceable units in a turn for more efficiency. There is a small token that moves back and forth between those units of Fusiliers to allow them to shoot into combat, which can be handy if there are actually any left after a round of fighting. That being said, I imagine a lot of the time you'll want to castle around your Fusil Major, using a Shield Bash enhancement to keep enemies from tying you in combat, assuming that you live long enough to worry about that. Overall, it's a Spearhead I'm not overly convinced by. I don't feel there's enough damage output, movement options or resiliency to make much of a dent against a lot of spearheads, and sadly for me it's one of the weaker ones out there. Next we have the Gloomspite Gitz with their new Snarlpack Huntaz spearhead, which sadly is yet to be released, but inside you'll get 1 Snarl boss with Wolfgit retinue, 6 Snarlpack riders and 2 Sunstealer wheelers. This comes to a total of 530 points for the unit and a massive 43% discount, which is one of the better boxes around when it comes to value for money. The majority of these models came out as part of the new Git Mob army set that was released back in February, and I must admit I'm a huge fan of these sculpts. They're fantastic looking miniatures and a very different direction to the current Gloomspite Git Spearhead. Lots of fast moving, albeit not hard hitting units to get around the board quickly, with a ton of character in each model to enjoy the building and painting side of the hobby. If you wanted to jump into this aspect of the faction, I could see a world where grabbing the army box, which is still available at the time of recording at a number of game stores, alongside this spearhead would be a really good pickup and the bulk of the army. In terms of the spearhead itself, this is one I feel is better than it probably gets credit for. Movement is king for this spearhead, and with a 12-inch move across the board, alongside the free retreat from its fast as Frazzlegit battle trait and the smaller size board, it really makes for an extremely mobile force that is fantastic at scoring. The high movement, threat range and large bases make them great for tying up the opponent and blocking moving lanes too, although that does come at a cost where the base sizes make it easier to get into combat with you as well. Speaking of combat, this is where the high movement balances out a little with this force. You don't particularly have durable models with 4-up saves on the cavalry and chariot, but a 5+ on the character and retinue, so you won't expect him to stay alive particularly long. Add to the fact that these guys don't have any rend on their melee attacks apart from the boss, it definitely stunts their output against higher armoured targets. You are looking for sheer weight of dice here and ganging up on one target with a bigger number of units to make sure you kill them, before scurrying off quickly around the board. It's best to think like a Git for combat scenarios and using your leader's great snarling howl to help make sure of the kill. As we mentioned earlier, the leader isn't exactly durable, which makes for the fact that 3 out of your 4 options for his enhancement are once per game abilities, which depending on your matchup may well come in handy, with either providing rend to take on a higher armoured target, -1 to hit you in combat if you think you're going to get alpha striked, or untargetable by ranged attacks, which is really good against a shooting army like the Caradons for example. The last is a great way to make up for the lack of damage at taking out minor supporting characters with mortals. This makes for a nice little suite of choices depending on the matchup and if you are the attacker or defender, which makes a change from typically only having 1 or 2 options in most spearheads. The Sunstealer wheelers provide some good mortal wound output by just doing what it wants to do, and if you take Frazzle Boom on top, you have 2 nice exploding vehicles. That being said, flanking force regiment ability is pretty strong too, especially if you know you're going first. You can either set up and redeploy defensively if going second, or if you know you're going to be going first, you can be really aggressive with either grabbing points, completing tactics, movement mortals with the chariots, or getting stuck into support characters if the opponent hasn't screened well enough, as you can set up just outside 6 inches. This is a really good ability that opens up a lot of options for you. Overall, this is a really interesting spearhead to play and really does need its box to be released to make it a lot cheaper to pick up. I love the high mobility and hit and run style tactics of this force, and if you can look past the war scrolls and lack of rend and think more about the scoring potential, board presence and objective pressure, you have a pretty good spearhead on your hands here. Just remember to gang up like a good Git should for favourable combats. Onto the Seraphon Sunblood Prowler Spearhead now, and we get 1 Sunblood pack, which is the Jaws of Itzel Warhammer Underworlds box, 10 Saurus Warriors, 10 Hunters of Huanchi and 3 Terrawings from the Hunters of Huanchi Warcry box, and 1 Spawn of Kotek. This brings you between 610 and 650 points depending on the loadout for the Hunters of Huanchi, although the Sunblood pack are currently in Legends, so that could be something that changes in the future. As for value, it's sitting at 37%, which is a little better than the current, although with a lot more infantry and the Underworld's box price possibly skewing it a little. For full Age of Sigmar, I could see a world of getting both Spearheads to collect an army if you wanted to add more infantry and skinks to your force, but it would really depend on the style of force you were looking to build. While it's not quite as exciting model-wise as the large centrepiece elite units from the first one, there is a lot of good in here to flesh out a force, and the Hunters of Huanshi Skinks look a hell of a lot better than their older counterparts. In terms of the Spearhead itself, this certainly isn't quite as all or nothing as the other one is. You start the game with a unit of 10 Saurus Warriors, 3 Terror Wings and the general Sunblood pack on the board, with the rest coming in on turn 3, although this feels very different to the other Spearheads with the same setups. You still have the 3 starting units trying to stay in the game for the first 2 turns, but your reserve units coming in on turn 3 don't really sweep the board like the Ogres or Undrasta's Stormcast do, but rather feel more like objective stealers and late game point scorers to make up the difference, especially as they can deploy 6 inches away from an enemy unit. That's not to say your 10-man block of Saurus Warriors with the Sunblood can't deal with plenty of threats. The Sunblood Savage Bellow ability giving the Saurus Warriors crit 2 hits on their 20 attacks will do a good amount of work, although that ability will also make the spawn of Kotek's weapons pretty devastating too in later rounds if the Warlord is still alive. You're also probably going to take Scaled Aegis as your regiment ability to give your warriors a 6-up ward on a 3-up, a lot more than the followers of Huanshi. This ability helps to make them a pretty durable unit, especially when on an objective. The leader also has a nice bit of built-in durability with the passive Scaled Protectors. Dropping 1 point of damage each phase is helpful if there are any Sunbloods left, while the extra OC is fairly negligible but could come up in some situations. In terms of its enhancements, I'd probably be looking at Instinctive Commander the most, as the extra movement, albeit on a 3-up, could well help for scoring and getting into certain combats, while Savage Mauling in certain matchups could make a reasonable difference. Nighthaunt definitely comes to mind. While the other 2 enhancements are okay, you'd feel pretty bad if you took Blessed by the Old Ones and rolled a 1. The Skink's ranged output once they come on will do a little bit of incidental work, although their Star Venom ability will help future combats for your melee units. Thankfully it's on a 2-up, unlike the Terror Wings' Nerve Shredding Screeches ability that's on a 4. I don't imagine you'll ever be able to combine them with the Terror Wings being particularly squishy. Lastly, your spawn of Kotek should be able to deal with a unit the turn it comes in, only requiring a 6-inch charge. While it's not super swingy, it's certainly one of the biggest hitting units that you've got. Overall, I can see this being a decent mid-tier Spearhead, although you'll definitely want to be playing on Ossiarch the most with 2 central objectives to jump onto and fight over while waiting for your reserves to come in. The Spearhead has a nice blend of units, I just worry a little that into some matchups your reserves may come in and be unable to make a big enough impact on the board state. If you like the Seraphon and want a new gameplay style to the original one, this will 100% give you that. Onto the Ossiarch Bonereaepers now, and inside the Mortisan Elite Spearhead we get 1 Mortisan Artifactor, 6 Necropolis Stalkers or Immortis Guards, and 2 Morghast Harbingers or Morghast Archai. This makes you between 700 and 780 points depending on which build option you go for, which is really good. Coupled with a 36% discount for this more elite set of models makes it a great box on paper. My first thought straight off the bat is thank God there is a discount box for this army that doesn't have Mortek Guard in it. I love the larger constructs for the Bonereaepers, and having this many in one box, especially with the build options, makes it really good value for money. It definitely complements the existing box well, and if you've gotten any of the older battle forces to start this force, it'll complement them too. I don't feel this is a buy 2 of, but definitely a great purchase for a Bonereaepers army you're starting or expanding. In terms of the Spearhead, this is a very elite army which epitomises alpha striking, although there is a little more to it than that. This is a very low model count army, with only the Sons of Behemat Spearhead box having less models than this, which comes with both positives and negatives here. The positives are that each model is strong and provides a lot of output, especially when buffed by your leader with the refined creations granting crit 2 hits. There are no bad targets for that ability in the Spearhead either, so keeping this hero safe is a priority. Being close to the Immortis guard for the 5-up ward is a sensible thing to do. Your 2 units to start on the board with the general do provide options for which units they are better going into with their damage profiles, with the Stalker's Switch Aspects ability allowing you to decide on an offensive or defensive buff depending on the circumstances that you're in, which I'm a big fan of. Your Morghast Archai hit like absolute trucks when they come in on turn 2, so you'll have one turn of potentially lower scoring before they come in and deal with any threats. This is a really good army into other elite forces too. Your units are fairly durable as well, with good armor saves and a 6-up ward on top. Plus, if you take the Mend Constructs ability on your leader, healing D3 each battle round keeps them around longer. That being said, I also don't mind Shardstorm, especially into high model count armies where your elite units can struggle, especially if they get tied up in combat. One of my favourite aspects of this army is their battle trait, Relentless Discipline. All of these buffs are helpful in a variety of phases, and being close to your general makes these buffs come off more consistently. The Archai get it on a 3-up regardless of whether they are inside 12 inches or not. For the regiment abilities, I'm quite partial to Peerless Cohesion to either get a critical ability on 2 of your units or treat it as a reroll so one of the 2 units gets it. Although Immaculate Generalship for the ability going off on 2s inside 12 inches or anywhere for the Archai gives you a lot more consistency. The downside is the low objective control this army has. Taking objectives off your opponent may well prove difficult, especially if you get tied down in combat, as it can really hamper your scoring. You're basically hoping to wipe enough models each time to overtake it and bring their scoring potential down, or utilising a once per game enhancement for the general, which honestly, there are better options available. That being said, picking Ossiarch and getting straight into the middle and castling around your general for a turn before the Archai come in on turn 2 and start causing havoc isn't a bad way to go. Overall, I think this is a fantastic Spearhead to pick up, being a lot of fun to play. The low model count means it's quick to build and paint up, but doesn't require a huge amount of thought to play. If you can try to make all of their activations count, you'll have a great time smashing into the enemy and cleaving them apart. It plays so differently to the other Bonereaper Spearhead too, so if you're a fan of that army and want a new playstyle, I'd 100% grab this one. I certainly did. Next up, we have the Ogor Mawtribes Scrapglutt Spearhead, and inside we get 1 Hrothgorn Mantrapper, which is the old Warhammer Underworlds box, 8 Iron Guts, 12 Gnoblars, and 1 Gnoblar Scrap Launcher, which can also be built as an Iron Blaster. This nets you between 750 and 780 points depending on the build option, although this alongside its 33% discount is a little misleading due to the Hrothgorn Mantrapper leading the unit being from an older Warhammer Underworlds box, so a little estimate in the price there. Plus the fact that he's in Legends for now could well make this feel less value to players wanting to build the army using this box. Also, while the 12 Gnoblars in this box do provide monetary value, there isn't enough in here for the required 20-man unit to run in full Age of Sigmar. That being said, it does complement the other Spearhead well, with the Iron Guts being the main bulk here. The other box is exceptional value for money and a lot more points too, so one I'd grab 2 of, although this does give you a good option if you wanted to get 1 of each for some alternative units, especially if the leader comes out of Legends. In terms of the Spearhead, we've got ourselves another force where the first 2 turns you try to survive and score the points you can before the big hitters come in on turn 3 and turn the tide. The downside is that compared to the other Ogre Spearhead, the models on the board at the start are much less survivable, so the first couple of turns will end up being a lot tougher to navigate. The Let's Get Stuck In ability for the Iron Guts coming on is a lot more limiting than some other Spearheads, although depending on the state of the board, they'll more than likely have something in their threat range to deal with. The Gnoblars are your chaff unit that basically tickle the opponent in both ranged and melee, but thankfully regenerate at the end of every turn and have reinforcements which makes them an okay objective taker. But more often, perfect snacks for your general to heal with the It's a Hard Life Regiment ability, which I'd probably be taking more often than Frenzied Artillery. Your general allows for decent control score manipulation with no slacking to make up for the poor objective control on most units, and is fairly survivable with staying useful. While the 5-up armor save is poor, having a 5-up ward which only whittles down on successful saves means you're always getting something out of each token. The Scrap Launcher's 3d6 ranged attacks is certainly inconsistent, but the crit auto wound ability saves it a little, and you certainly won't want it in combat. Not the best damage output, but the Rain of Scrap -1 to hit debuff if it kills a model this turn in shooting can be pretty beneficial to keeping your small number of units alive before the reinforcements come on. The Iron Guts do hit like an absolute truck, and pairing them up with your general will end up killing most things it runs into, especially if you take the Savage Instincts enhancement to fight with them immediately after your general to finish a unit off. I'm a big fan of this enhancement, and it will make a pretty good difference over the course of the game. Nasty Trap is a pretty cool ability too, to be able to stop a move or charge once per game on a 4-up, which could be key to stopping your opponent scoring some points. And if you wanted to make him more survivable, Massive Bulk giving him +2 health alongside It's a Hard Life could make him pretty tough to remove from the battlefield. -1 to rend on its attacks once per battle is very situational for matchups, but I'm not sure it's one you're really going to take with the Iron Guts doing the heavy lifting for you. Overall, this has a lot of different units compared to the other Ogre Spearhead. It feels very much the same in terms of playstyle, albeit with far less survivable and lethal units on the board to hold onto for 2 turns until your reinforcements come on. Those Iron Guts will end up doing a lot of work, I just don't know how many units you'll have left before they turn up. It's certainly a step down in class from one of the best Spearheads currently in the format, but I can still see it being pretty fun to play. Last of all, we have the new Soulblight's Gravelords Deathrattle Tombhost Spearhead, which sadly isn't out yet, but inside the box you'll get 1 White King, 10 Barrow Guard, 5 Barrow Knights, and 20 Deathrattle Skeletons. This brings you a really solid 670 points inside the box and lets you a 30% discount, which is about par for the course, and with there being a good amount of new sculpts in this too, some nice value for money here. This for me would be a really cracking start to a force and a hell of a lot of skeletons. The Deathrattle Skeletons were some of my favourite models when they came out when Cursed City was released, but I must admit the Barrow Guard Knights have taken that to another level. Really striking looking models. The White King is a little dated but still holds up in this force, and honestly I would be happy to pair this with the recent army box that were just released too. In terms of the Spearhead itself, this for me feels like a very solid force. While you have no reinforcements, bar the 10 Deathrattle Skeletons that come in reserve on turn 3, the amount of recursion available with the Deathrattle and Barrow Knights each turn make for some very long lasting units for your opponents to deal with. This effectively means that the Barrow Knights and Skeletons can disengage from any combat without worry, as they'll return the models at the end of each turn, making up for the retreat damage. Place on top some decent armor saves with the Aura of Antiquity ability reducing rend by 1 for an enemy unit in combat with yours, 6+ wards across the board which can be improved to a 5+, with the White King being in combat range of the Barrow Guard, provides you with a pretty resilient force. You don't have a huge amount of damage output throughout the Spearhead, it's more of an attritional army wanting to outlast your opponent. That being said, the crit mortals help make their damage a little bit more consistent on everything bar the Deathrattle Skeletons. A 4-inch move on everything bar the Knights is a tad slow for getting around the board for different battle tactics, which can be improved with the Death March Regiment ability on one unit, although overwhelming hordes would be the choice more often than not due to the 3 10-man units and picking favourable targets. The enhancements for your character, who is actually pretty solid in melee, are pretty much all usable depending on the matchup. Rend 2 is great against more elite forces, Heal 2 on a crit with 5 attacks will happen pretty regularly to keep him on the battlefield longer, while the Drain Soul Pendant against a heavy melee force can make a really big difference. Your main weakness, bar the lack of speed, is if your opponent focuses units down one by one, then you may have a problem. That being said, your Barrow Knights are your best unit, so try to make sure they don't get overrun by the opponent to keep them around longer with the recursion. Overall, you have a pretty straightforward force here that can take a punch. Keep your units from being focused down one by one, and the recursion you have will become a big problem for your opponent, especially the Barrow Knights, who are your MVPs. Hopefully this box will be released soon, as I'm sure it's one a fair number of people will enjoy. We also got a balance update in the past few days for the Spearhead format, which I've linked in the description below. The Cities of Sigmar Castellite Company got a very nice change, with the Free Guild Steel Helms now being 2 units of 5, which is a great move for more flexibility for scoring, plus the big change being reinforcements added onto the Cavaliers, which is a fantastic update and really helps the power level of the overall Spearhead. While not earth-shattering, I do think now they're in a far better place to be more competitive. The Daughters of Cain Heartflayer troop had a slight tweak where the Melusai Ironscale's all-out slaughter ability has changed from +1 to hit to +1 attack. This is a little boost mainly for turn 3, where her ability will now actually be worth using in combination with the Blood Rights battle trait. Not sure if it'll change things much, but it's more of a quality of life update. The Disciples of Tzeentch Fluxblade Coven now has reinforcements on their Carrick Acolytes, which is a good update for them. Not only does it give you another unit over the course of the game, but it also makes the Transient Forms Regiment ability a lot more consistent too. I'm really looking forward to seeing how this plays out and if they start moving up the tier list. The Hedonites of Slaanesh Blades of Lurid Dream Spearhead are next, and this is something I'm particularly happy to see since I reviewed them in the previous video. The Depravity Points thresholds have dropped for Sadistic Spite from 24 to 18 and Oblivious Indulgence from 36 down to 24. This reduction in the breakpoints for those abilities means you're more likely to get these online during the course of the game and actually make an impact for you. Hopefully it means getting to that nice decision point for your opponent quicker than they prefer, with you getting either crit mortals versus them taking D3 damage to one of their units. I'll be interested to see if this change was enough to make them more competitive, as it's a box that I've been quite tempted by. Next we have the Caradron Overlord Skyhammer Task Force, and that had a slight tweak to the frigate's bomb racks, making its damage output more consistent by not needing to roll a 2 up to get it in the first place and being D3+1 damage now instead of just D3. Last of all, the Ironjaw's Big Mob Spearhead got a nice quality of life change for the Mega Boss's Get Stuck In Lads ability, which now reads pick a friendly unit wholly within 12 inches of this unit to be the target, from just being Brutes units. This means he can target himself or the Ardboys as well to get that +1 attack buff, which is a very nice update to have. So these are the 6 new Spearhead boxes, and honestly there is a high number of these that are really good pickups, especially starting out. A lot of these really do complement their first Spearhead boxes in order to grow an army at a discount, which is always a positive for this game. The Cities of Sigmar and the Ossiarch Bonereaepers are the perfect example of this. Overall, these are great options to get a good discount and start your journey onto the tabletop. If you've come looking at this purely for the Spearhead format gameplay side of things, you really won't be disappointed with the vast majority of these, apart from maybe the Cities of Sigmar Fusil-platoon, which does feel particularly weak. While there are some that are stronger than others, you can have some really great games on the tabletop with most of them, and with good play, often some of their lower tier ones can punch up well. It's a really great format that is also balanced pretty well for the most part. On the screen now is an updated overall tier list of all the Spearheads too, if you wanted to see where each sat for me going into Sand and Bone. I can imagine the matchups and this tier list changing and developing as we play more of this game pack and see how it suits particular Spearheads and playstyles. Let me know in the comment section below if you're planning on picking up one of these or which you're most excited to play in the new season. I'd love to know. Plus, if you'd like to further the discussion or talk about all things Warhammer, there is a link below for the channel's Discord where hobbyists of all levels can talk and share about what they're doing in this fantastic hobby. It would be great to have you in the growing community. If you enjoyed the video and found it useful, please hit that like and subscribe button, as it really helps the channel to grow. Thank you so much for watching the command phase, and I'll see you in the next video.